Next on the agenda is the issue that I think has made us so popular today, a discussion on firearms in the Capitol and on Capitol Square. If I might, to sort of set the stage, I would ask members to indulge me for a moment as we sort of take a trip down memory lane. In 2013, three of us, myself, Tim Bolin, who at the time was the business director for the House of Representatives, and the Secretary of the Senate at that time, Carol Viventi, we were very concerned about what appeared to be some neglect to the upkeep of the Capitol and Capitol Square. So in consultation with Kerry Chartkoff, who at the time was the Capitol historian, we set about to look at a mechanism that would let us deal with those pressing issues. We worked with the Service Bureau and developed the concept of the Capitol Commission. We then took that concept to several members of the legislature who had expressed support for what we were doing. And subsequent to that, 4 bills were introduced that ultimately created the Capitol Commission. Now, it was the intent of the legislature at that time and the intent of those of us who sort of came up with the idea that the Capitol Commission would have exclusive control over the grounds and the upkeep and care of the Capitol building itself. We have, over the last 6 years, accepted that challenge, and I think done some really good things for the Capitol and Capitol Square. We are redeveloping, as far as the grounds is concerned, the west lawn to the Capitol, which will greatly enhance the beautification of Capitol Square. We have taken steps to improve the energy efficiency by creating the geothermal field. That is completed. We have 244 deep wells that will greatly reduce over time the cost to the taxpayers of the state of Michigan and has made us very energy efficient. We are now in the midst of construction of Heritage Hall, which will relieve a lot of stress that is being placed on the Capitol. We have over 200,000 school children who visit their Capitol every year. We want it to be a warm and inviting and educational visit. I have to tell you, not in our wildest dreams did we ever think that the Capitol Commission would be looking at a situation like we're looking at today, where we're being asked to interpret law, to kind of take some of the responsibility that historically has been the responsibility of the legislature and develop a plan for control of firearms. I don't by any means mean to demean the tremendous amount of interest that we've received from individuals across the state and from legislators, that this is a serious matter. We take it seriously. We have received hundreds of emails and phone calls over the last few days expressing both feelings for limiting and some rather adamant feelings that, hey, the law is pretty clear as it exists. In fact, some of them have quoted from a posting that's on the Michigan State Police website that says, in Michigan, it's legal for a person to carry a firearm in public as long as the person is carrying the firearm with lawful intent and the firearm is not concealed. You will not find a law that states it is legal to openly not carry an open firearm. It is legal because there's no Michigan law that prohibits it. However, Michigan law limits the premises on which a person may carry a firearm. So that has kind of been the premise that we have operated on, the position kind of that we have taken. Enter a letter from the Attorney General last Thursday indicating that she thought that we had greater authority and that we could control firearms. That letter was upgraded at 9 o'clock this morning. At least that's when I received the official opinion from the AG, saying that clearly you do have the authority to limit firearms on the Capitol Square. I would also like to tell you that we have received several letters from legislators, and those letters will be included in the minutes of this meeting. And just a short time ago, we received a letter from Mike Shirkey, Senate Majority Leader. And I'd like to read a portion of that letter into the record. I write to request the Commission delay a formal decision at the May 11th meeting and instead commit to meeting with legislative leaders, Senate and House sergeants, and Michigan State Police to discuss the best policy going forward. The choice to allow or disallow open carry of firearms brings with it the need for a thorough review of how the policy will be implemented and communicated to the public. So with that kind of as a backdrop, I would like to open the issue up for discussion and recognize Commissioner O'Brien.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion and to move to form a committee to study the issue, seek input from the legislature and executive, and report back a recommendation to the full commission, and to name to this committee the commission chair, vice chair, secretary of the Senate, and Commissioner Bill Kandler.
Representative O'Brien makes the motion that we create a special committee. Is there support for her motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Truscott supports the motion. Discussion on the motion. The question for us is the creation of a special committee. Yes.
Bill, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Bill.
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First of all, isn't that 4 members in that committee?
Yes, she did name 4. That is actually a quorum of the full commission. There was, I think, some thought about maybe 3, but we would still be subject to the Open Meetings Act either way. So it was felt it would bring more input if we included 4 members of the commission. And of course, we will comply with the Open Meetings Act with any meeting scheduled by this select committee.
Then my second, I lost you here.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Off the audio for me for a second. You still there?
Yes.
Okay. And my second question, I would like to postpone the motion for. I'd like to first, before we decide to go to a committee, which I think probably we're going to have to do. I'd like to hear a report from our legal counsel and a little discussion about that recommendation before we go to the motion to how we proceed. Does that make sense? I'd like to hear the report from our legal counsel.
Would you agree that if we allow some latitude, we keep the O'Brien motion on the table, but allow latitude under discussion and call in Amy Shaw to share with us the research that she has done? Would you be comfortable with that?
Yes, I would.
Okay, let's proceed in that manner. Any member of the commission, before we ask Amy for her opinion, any member of the commission like to offer additional comments at this time? Yes, Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about the issue, and in my 10 years at the Capitol, I've been a part or a witness of many a protest. My concern is that if we were to make a decision today, it may not be the most deliberate and thorough discussion. Furthermore, having just received less than about 2 hours ago an opinion from the Attorney General, I have not been allowed to have a full discussion with our attorney about this. So for me to make a final decision today would not be doing the duty of which I'm obligated to do. And so the motion is not intended to sidestep the issue, but rather to do it in a thorough manner, to maybe even address some of the issues we had at the 2012 protest, which in fact was much larger than the protest of last month. I think there's a wide array of issues that if we're going to seek legal opinion, or possibly even laws being proposed or passed, we need to make sure we're encompassing everything that's happened here and not reacting to a single incident. So that was the reason for my motion.
Thank you. John Truscott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I want to say that, I appreciate all the letters that we've been getting. I appreciate the fact that they have been very civil in tone on a very emotional issue. My comments relate to, and Amy may or may not choose to address them, but as it relates to the motion, some things that I would like considered, and maybe Amy can help us with that now. If not, it may take more research. But we took an oath to uphold the state laws and the Constitution when we joined this commission. I take that very seriously. So as Margaret said, this issue's been around with us for about 2 weeks, and I'm not comfortable rushing into something without a full vetting, legally and otherwise. A couple of things that I would like to be considered, and we didn't have a chance to really have the time to thoroughly review the Attorney General's opinion. But one thing that stuck out to me that she said is that we have the obligation to care for and protect the safety of those working in and visiting the Capitol grounds and facilities. Now, I agree that common sense dictates that that's the case. However, putting it in an opinion or considering it in state law confers liability to us that is not in state law. So that is the type of thing that I want to see put out there. And then also, I hope that as part of this committee, we can review how other states have done this. My cursory review has been, it's either been done by state law, by administrative rule, or by executive order. And it's my belief that that's the appropriate place for it. And then the third, I want to go back and review an opinion from a previous Attorney General that says that commissions have no authority to change or abridge state law. And it's my understanding that's sitting before the Supreme Court right now. So for us to act on something that is going to be decided at the highest court in Michigan, it might be prudent to wait until after that. So Amy may or may not choose to address any of those, but I hope that that would be included in the committee due diligence.
Any other commissioner? Yes.
I guess I misunderstood. I thought we were going to wait to discuss this until after. I'm sorry, John, still talking. I apologize.
Amy Shaw, are you there? Amy?
I am, sorry.
Okay. Have you followed the questioning here and the conversation?
I have, and I agree with John. It's a huge topic that needs much more deliberation on.
Okay.
And were you wanting me to provide my analysis at this time, or?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. I sure will. First, let me start by saying that this is not a personal opinion about firearm regulation at the Capitol. I appreciate the feeling of fear and intimidation that the lawmakers are expressing. It's very disturbing. I agree, as the Attorney General said, that the freedom of civil discourse does not imply the right to threaten others with harm or violence. And I hope that they reach the objective they seek in the appropriate way. Also, I'd like to make abundantly clear that firearms can be regulated. The narrative out in the press suggesting that the Capitol Commission is indicating or advising that firearms cannot be regulated is absolutely absurd. This false narrative is concerning and dangerous as it harnesses deep and valid feelings on a larger, very important issue and rests them on a commission that is not involved in this debate. It distracts from and dilutes the importance of the objective of those that seek and deserve a real resolution to this situation. But we're not here to discuss the larger issue of regulating firearms at the Capitol. It's incredibly important and should be given the appropriate focus. We're here to discuss the Capitol Commission's authority to change state law and affect constitutional rights. You've asked whether the Michigan State Capitol Commission has the requisite authority to regulate firearms within the Capitol and specifically within the elevated gallery positions inside each chamber. The Michigan Capitol Commission is in charge of restoration woodwork, historic paintings, vintage chandeliers, polishing marble floors, planting flowers, and docent tours. The Capitol Commission does not set public policy. The legislature does. Article 4, Section 1 of the Michigan Constitution states, the legislative power of the state of Michigan is vested in the Senate and House of Representatives. It is indeed the legislature that has the authority and is the appropriate body to change state law to regulate firearms at the Capitol generally, and particularly as it relates to the elevated public galleries in each chamber. The Michigan Court of Appeals has held that the constitutional guaranteed right to bear arms is not absolute, but may yield to a legislative enactment that represents a reasonable regulation by the state in the exercise of its police power to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Michigan citizens. The Michigan State Capitol Historic Site Act created the Michigan Capitol Commission. The Act confers upon the Michigan Capitol Commission the duty to maintain the historic site. When reading the Act in its entirety, it's apparent the legislative intent was for the Commission to maintain the building, the grounds, the statues, the artwork for all Michiganders. A look at MCL 4.1943 lists in specificity the special features of the building and grounds, noting the history, the cost of construction, and the awards bestowed upon the restoration. It's evident that the Michigan State Capitol Historic Site Act and the creation of the Michigan Capitol Commission were intended to maintain and preserve the structure and history associated with the special site. The Commission is the custodian. Nowhere does it confer upon the Commission the police or public policy making powers of this state. The Act does grant exclusive control of the historic site to the Commission for the above-mentioned responsibilities, with the exception of the Senate and House spaces, which are reserved to the respective chambers. Article 4, Section 16 of the Michigan Constitution affords each House the right to establish their own rules and procedures. The elevated galleries within the Capitol are under the control of each chamber, not the Capitol Commission. The Commission's control of the public spaces in furtherance of the maintenance and as a custodian of the building is restricted by Constitution and the laws of the state of Michigan. Although the Commission has the authority to adopt procedures and rules for the use of the public areas in the Capitol, they relate to the maintenance and preservation of the building. A public policy decision of this magnitude rests with the lawmaking body of the state, the legislature. It's unlawful to carry a gun in the White House, on the grounds of the White House, or in a federal building. This is established by federal law, not by a commission rule. Of the noted states regulating firearms in their capital contained in the House Democratic Caucus's letter urging the commission to act, one thing is consistent. They were enacted in statute. None of the regulations were initiated by a commission of unelected officials charged with the upkeep of the Capitol building, nor should they be. The cases mentioned regarding the school regulations are distinguishable. The court cited the narrow issue of whether the school districts in Ann Arbor and Clio were local units of government and thus banned from regulating firearms under MCL 123.1102. This case purposefully did not decide whether there was a conflict preemption or a constitutional infringement. Further, a review of the revised school code, Act 451 of 1976, Section 380.11A, grants the school district general powers, including providing for the safety and welfare of pupils while at school or a school-sponsored activity or while en route to or from school or a school-sponsored activity. The school districts and their enabling statute are expressly charged with the safety and welfare of students on their property. There is no such comparable directive in Act 240 of 2013. The commission is charged with the maintenance of the historic site. This would be the equivalent of the custodian of the school district establishing firearm regulations. This situation is regarding a school, not the Capitol building. The Capitol isn't just a public building, it is the public building, the only place where members of the public can properly meet to take part in their government. The burden of a ban at a school can be more easily mitigated as a person can choose not to visit the school. This is not the case for the Capitol. It's the only place where the seat of government exists. To appropriately overcome that heightened burden, the regulation should be properly based in law, not a number in the procedures for the use of the public areas of the Michigan State Capitol pamphlet. Legislative action is necessary to change state law and properly regulate the open carry of firearms at the Capitol. The legislature is the elected body with the clear responsibility of establishing public policy in the state. Moreover, each legislative chamber controls their own gallery. Rules adopted by the Commission under their Act 240 authority regarding firearms in the public spaces within the Capitol would be in conflict with Article 1, Section 6, Article 4, Section 1, and Article 4, Section 16 of the Michigan Constitution, as well as current state law. To ask our first responders, the state police, the House sergeants, and the Senate police to enforce a commission procedure that conflicts with the Constitution and current state law would be untenable. I totally understand the passion behind those urging the commission to go beyond their authority to act in the hope that this Hail Mary pass quickly accomplishes their goals. The debate on this topic is at a fever pitch. People are uncomfortable and feel intimidated, and they deserve to be heard. I got an email from a very well-educated civil rights attorney this weekend who had read the splashy headlines and erroneously believed that I was poised to advise the Capitol Commission that firearms cannot be regulated at the Capitol. That's the false narrative that's out there. Think about that. You're being thrust in the crosshairs, and undue intimidation is being forced upon you based upon the erroneous information that keeps getting repeated. Firearms can be regulated. However, I would ask you this. Take out the hotly contested and extremely sensitive topic of guns and consider your answer under a different scenario. Would you be comfortable if this commission, under their Act 240 authority, could issue a rule in the procedures for the use of the public areas of the Michigan State Capitol pamphlet, which took away your voting rights? What about your civil rights? I bet you would not read Act 240 to give the commission this authority. That is exactly what this type of action, if taken, would indicate is possible. This extremely sensitive issue should be left to the legislative determination. A hasty and unlawful decision on this important topic would be unwise. This justifies further, in-depth review. I would recommend that the commission seek outside counsel and input and give this very impactful decision the utmost care and consideration.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And for the record, Amy Shaw is the legal consultant for the Capitol Commission. Bill, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I guess first of all, I'm sorry, I have to say that really disappointed what I just heard. That was not legal advice. That was speech, and how you feel and what you think. That I'm disappointed. I'm taking this very seriously, and I wish we all would. And that just was not a serious legal review. I'm sorry. I know he was capable. That's very capable. I don't know why we got political commentary included in that. That is disappointing to me, because I think we all want to take this seriously. We 2 or 3 weeks ago, none of us in the commission would ever even thought of the fact that we were dealing with this. would be within our scope. We hadn't thought about it. And then, out of the blue, about 4 days ago, we got an AG opinion saying we do. And I was, at first, when it was first mentioned, the idea about taking this, I thought, well, we don't have the authority. Now that I've read this, I spent the entire weekend reading the opinion, reading the court cases around it. I'm thinking, well, maybe we do. Again, I'm not 100% convinced, but I'm thinking maybe we do. And I still like to probe into this quite a bit more to try to figure out what is the real situation as far as our status. And that's why I was hoping for, some serious legal guidance from the other side, from the perspective saying you probably don't, so we could look at both and try to figure it out. I don't know whether anything been submitted by Amy in writing. Maybe it didn't have all political commentary in it, but I haven't seen that yet. I think we really need to look at that. We need to discuss the AG's opinion with the AG, and I'm hearing from all kinds of people that supposedly we're going to get a formal AG opinion, not just the letter we have. That would, of course, be more significant. And I'd like to delve into a little bit more about the issues regarding the Ann Arbor School District case. I agree with Amy. When I first read this, I thought, well, this has to do with just the issue of whether or not they are a local unit of government as defined in that act. And obviously, according to the act, they're not. However, Amy, I think you might agree with this. Much more of the discussion, actually, as I read this, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm just kind of like pulling this stuff out, trying to understand it. It's really much more about the issue about trying to measure whether or not an action by the Ann Arbor School District would be a direct preemption of legislative authority or a field preemption. And basically what they came to the agreement is the point of it. They said that the legislature is not exempting the entire field of gun regulation. So it's possible for other entities other than the legislature to regulate. Now again, that doesn't necessarily mean we have the authority, but it's making the point that others than the legislature do. I think we need to look into that more carefully to discuss that. But even maybe a more relevant situation may be the courts. Michigan law says that you cannot carry a gun into a court. But about 3 lines below that statute says except unless you have a concealed weapon permit. So according to the law, you can take a concealed weapon into the court. However, nonetheless, the courts have issued a administrative directive saying nobody can take any weapon into the courthouse, and they've enforced that. If you have a gun with you, you cannot go in. You got to leave the gun there or else you're turned away. Again, the law says concealed weapon permit person can go in there. So I try to understand that. I talk to people, including judges, and their answer was that what it means is that if you try to go into a courthouse with a concealed weapon on you, it's not a crime. But that doesn't mean the court can't turn you away. Just like if somebody might be able to turn you into the private property, if they had a rule there saying you can't bring a gun, they could stop you from bringing a gun. So we need to look at that. That may be more closely aligned with the situation we're in. We're not talking about making it illegal. I don't think, or a violation. I don't think. We're just saying if you have, or we're just talking about if you have a weapon, can you or can you not enter? So anyway, I think we should look at that. But then that brings us to the situation. If we say if we want to have a policy saying somehow regulating weapons, guns, something coming into the building, what does that mean? We say no guns, for example. Does that mean state police can't come in with a gun? Does that mean security detail of a visiting dignitary coming in with their security can't bring a gun in? Is it only guns? Is it only concealed weapons? Is it only open carry? There's a lot of questions here. So I agree we need to review this seriously based upon the law. But I'm concerned about our starting because our first comments from our legal counsel included a lot of political commentary. That doesn't help us. This body should not be dealing with this as a political issue. We should be looking at it whether or not, from a legal point perspective, whether or not we have responsibility and the authority to do this. And I think if we have the authority to act, we have the duty to act. But hopefully, as a committee, we can work this through as this commission always has, as a purely objective review of what the law is, and then take our actions from that from there. Anyway, I'll get off my stuff now, but that's my thought.
Okay, thank you, Bill. and I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your reference to the fact that this commission, since its creation in 2014, has worked in a nonpartisan, non-political fashion. I do take a slight bit of issue. I think Amy's summation was not intended to be political. I'm sorry if it's interpreted that way. John Truscott.
Yeah.
Wait, and Chair, I would also like to make a comment at some point.
Sure, Joan Bauer, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Now, are we, at this point, Chairman Randall, are we commenting in general? Are we commenting on the motion? What are we?
Well, from a strict parliamentary point of view, we should be speaking only to the merit of whether we create the special committee or not. That's what the vote will be. But I was asked to extend some latitude so that members of the commission could go a little beyond whether or not we should have the special committee.
Okay. I have some general comments, but I also have comments on the committee.
Please go ahead and express both.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I was interested in serving on the Capital Commission because I care deeply about the building and what it represents. And when I served in the legislature, every day when I walked from my office to the Capitol, I pinch myself as I approach this grand building because I had the privilege of representing my constituents and the responsibility of making the best decisions I could for the people of my district and the state. I'm also a former history and government teacher who loves this grand old building for its historical significance to the citizens of our state. And I think that all of us on this commission, in fact, I know we do, that's what we thought we were signing up for to be on the commission. We have a strong commitment to maintain, preserve, and restore the Capitol and Capitol Square for the people of Michigan. And we realize, I hope and think we realize, that it's also our responsibility to ensure that this building is a safe place for the people who work here and for the hundreds of thousands of people who visit the Capitol each year, including over 200,000 school children, many of whom come in the springtime. And I just have to get on the record, I am deeply concerned with the safety of our legislators, the staff who work in the Capitol, and the thousands of people who come in and out of the building as they tour, they visit, they advocate, and they even cater the events that are held. 3 of us on this commission used to work in the Capitol building, so we can somewhat imagine what it would feel like to be in the House and Senate chambers with people in the gallery carrying guns, looking down on us as we debated and voted on highly emotional bills. 2 of our commissioners still work in those chambers, so you have firsthand experience with the Capitol building overflowing with people with guns. No one should have to come to work and be intimidated and worried, and even for their lives. And we need to make sure that our legislators can make the best decisions for us, the people of Michigan, without the fear of reprisal. I, like all of you, have received hundreds of emails in the past few days. I feel like I'm back in the House of Representatives from people on both sides of the issue. And I thank them for sharing their thoughts, opinions, and concerns. I've also talked to many people over the past 10 days who had no idea I was on the Capitol Commission, but they know I've been a state representative. They've been all ages, economic background, races, Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives. And the response has been completely, they all had no idea guns were allowed in the Capitol. And they couldn't believe nothing has been done. I agree. One thing I agree with Amy, with her statement that this is an extremely sensitive issue and the legislature should handle it. I agree. They could easily deal with it by putting parameters on guns in the Capitol building. I wish they would, but they haven't. And it is, in my opinion, authority to ensure the safety of the visiting public as well as those who carry out the people's work by prohibiting firearms within the Capitol building. We have the legal authority, I believe, and I would argue that we also have the moral responsibility. Accordingly, I think we should take action. I would be ready to take action today, and I know that it doesn't sound like my colleagues are. I have a motion that I could present. But if we go ahead with this committee, I have, number one, I think it's interesting there are 4 people on it. I would like to be on it also. We're already, if there's 4 people, maybe we need to meet as a committee as a whole with and carry on the business. It's a very important issue, obviously. Secondly, I think time is of the essence. I have seen committees at the legislature very quickly do many things when they were timely. So I would like to see us put a timeline on the work of this committee. I'd like to see us say that we need to reconvene in 48 hours to further discuss this. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bauer. John Truscott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Joan and Bill, I agree with you. I don't like seeing weapons in the building either. But I think we have to be very careful that we're not overstepping our bounds, because then if we make a decision, this is a question that I have for the lawyers through this committee, are we at risk of crossing some line and having some penalty for making a decision? Do we have civil liability at that point if we make a decision that's outside our bounds? I personally don't believe that as unelectable, unaccountable individuals that are basically here as museum caretakers and gardeners for the building, that we have the ability to overturn state law. There are appropriate bodies to do that, and I would encourage and support their action to do so. It's not our responsibility. So that's what I fear, is that we're overstepping our bounds. I've talked to numerous lawyers and even a judge friend of mine of all political stripes over the weekend, and they all agreed that we would have an injunction filed almost immediately if we took this action because it's beyond our bounds. But I think more importantly, we are probably one of the least political commissions or bodies around the Capitol. But yet we've been thrust into a very difficult political issue that has statewide importance and significance. And I don't think we can look past that. We were not appointed to get involved in politics or to make political decisions, but that's where we find ourselves. So I think studying this, getting the appropriate outside legal counsel so that we know what the bounds really are, rather than relying on people with political motivations to say one thing or the other. I would like independent review of this so we make sure we're making the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Truscott. Kerry Chartkoff.
Thank you.
Kerry,
You're on mute, Kerry.
Kerry, I think your mute is on.
All right. Doesn't say it is, but I will see. Yep.
Kerry, we are not able to hear you. Is your mute on?
No.
There, we got that.
I echo. I worked in the Capitol, as you all know, for about 30 years. And for more than 20 of those, I directed the Capitol Tour Guide Service, as well as serving as the building's historian. And I have watched the events from the standpoint of understanding what it is like to work in the building and to have in your care children who are touring the building with you. It's a very crowded building. It's small and it's heavily visited. If we have one of the highest visitation rates of any Capitol, and we do it in one of the smallest. So this creates all kinds of safety issues. A lot of discussion about why we keep signs out of the building. It has nothing to do with what's on the signs. It has to do, and by the way, all signs are not banned from the building. Signs on sticks are banned. And the simple reason is that when someone comes into a highly crowded building with a lot of intemperate issues going on, there's no place for them. People turn around and whack the person behind them, or they whack the walls. So we just said no sticks in the Capitol. But we go to great trouble to protect people's right to speak. We used to collect all those sticks as they came in and write the person's name on it so that when they went out to the front yard of the Capitol, they had their stick back and their sign. My concern about the recent issues has been the fact that people are open carrying into the Capitol building, which never happened when I work. I'm retired, and I no longer direct the tour guide service or serve as the building's historian. But I know what it's like to have such a thing going on in such a crowded building. The Capitol Commission indeed does have authority over the public areas of the Capitol, not over the chambers, not over the offices occupied by the House and Center, not over the governor's offices, but over the public areas. And that's the rotunda, the corridors, that sort of thing. And I think we do have that authority in those areas. We have always passed procedures for the use of the building. And yes, we do have authority over those procedures for the use of the building. We're not just gardeners. We're not just antique carriers. And we have the well-being of the Capitol and the well-being of all those who come to the building under our command, I should say control or authority. We are supposed to protect the right of the public to visit the building and also protect the security and well-being of those who work there. That's part of our mandate, as I understand it. So on the other hand, I do support, in other words, I obviously take this extremely seriously. I do not like what I have seen in the news of the threatening figures in the two chambers. And I do think we need to do something, but we can't do it in haste. This has just suddenly popped out of nowhere for us in many ways. And I think we need to take a little time to review it, discuss it, and decide how we're going to approach it. That is about it. So I thank you very much and turn the chair back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Kerry.
Wait, Chairman Randall,
Yes.
this is Joan. I could not hear a thing Kerry said.
Well, it was difficult, and I'm not sure what the technical problem is.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it was just because I had to be
No.
texted via phone. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Cameron. I think we need to recess and fix these technical issues. This is crazy.
I think your point is valid, but let's consult with our technician. Is there a fix, Alan?
Unfortunately, we've exceeded the license count on our Zoom licenses. The only way I could get the rest of the commissioners in is we would have to have some attendees drop out.
Did you hear that response, Bill?
I heard it.
Yeah, I heard it too, and I sensed the frustration in your voice, and I agree. I'm a little perplexed that we weren't better prepared for this. We knew we were going to have a lot of people in attendance. I guess we did not anticipate it exceeding our limit. I can assure you that this won't happen again. And to your point, Joan, if I might, I'd like to go back to the fact that this commission, in dealing with the issues that we have dealt with since the inception of the commission, has attempted to be as nonpartisan as we can. We have been thrown into an issue that by its very nature has partisan implications. But I pledge to you as chair, I will continue to fight vigorously to make sure that we keep it as pristine as we can, realizing that the issue is always going to have a political undertone. Having said that, I'm going to ask the maker of the motion if she would agree to add you add you to the list.
That's fine, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to offer to Commissioner Bauer and Commissioner Kandler just a real brief summary of what Commissioner Chartkoff had said. She basically agreed with a lot of the concerns that various people have raised and the thought that the Capital Commission should do something but not act in haste. So while she didn't state whether she directly opposes or supports a committee, she did talk about taking time to deliberate. And I just wanted to offer that to the two commissioners who are having difficulty hearing.
Thank you.
So you will be added in that motion. We can amend your motion, or you can resubmit it to include her name.
We can do amendment.
Okay. Representative Bauer offers to amend the motion to include her on the special committee. Is there support for that? We did. Commissioner Truscott supports. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed nay. The motion is amended to include you, Commissioner Bauer, to the special committee.
Thank you,
You
Chairman
bet.
Randall.
You bet. Is there any other discussion on the motion before us, that is to create a special committee to investigate all aspects and get back to the commission in a timely manner? Now, I realize that's kind of vague, but because we don't know what we'll run into as we seek outside counsel, it's difficult to put a time frame on it. So I'm going to charge that committee with the responsibility to get back to us in a timely manner. Is that acceptable?
This is, Chairman,
Yes.
I think based on everything that is happening, I think timely is too vague, a bit vague. I'm going to offer a first amendment that the committee get back to us with some initial work in 48 hours.
You're offering that it's an amendment to the O'Brien
Yes.
motion.
Yes.
Is there support for that amendment? Hearing none, the motion fails for lack of support. If there's no further discussion, yes.
I started speaking on this, but if we're going to take this seriously, we need to think seriously about how we're going to work through this correctly.
Yes.
Okay, so the bigger the committee, the harder it is to get it done. I think force them in. The idea is for a few people to sit down and go through the legal discussions and come back with an understanding, bring it to full commission. The bigger the group, the longer it's going to take to schedule, get everybody together. I'm just really concerned about even being four. And I know that means that people get excluded. If I get cut out, I guess so be it. But I mean, I think we need to do this in a way that's really efficient and effective, and be serious about this. We need to be able to act, move quickly. We can't add to the committee and then yet ask that we act quickly. And I'd like to see it be a group of three, and we're going to have to meet with and discuss with the Attorney General, the state police, and several other people to point to law and come to the conclusion as to our ability to act, and then come back to the commission with our answer. I mean, everybody in the commission is going to be able to see and discuss what this group does. The more cumbersome it is, the harder it's going to be to coordinate everybody's schedule. We know that. So anyway, my point is, I think we ought to consider going back to three people and creating a committee that size, rather than being four. That's my discussion point.
Would you like to offer an amendment to the O'Brien motion to reduce the number to three?
I would so move.
Okay. Is Is there support for that amendment?
I support that amendment, which sounds strange, but I support it.
Okay. Because the original motion names individuals, if we're going to reduce it to 3, what 3 are you suggesting? Or do you want to leave it up to the chair to appoint the 3 members?
Well, and that's also very awkward. I'd like to be part of it, but I understand I'm the one who's limiting. But
Well,
think
I'll tell you what, if you amend it the way that you leave it up to the chairman, I'll tell you who the 3 that I would pick. I would pick the maker of the original motion, Commissioner O'Brien. I would pick Bill Kandler and John Truscott, and cutting myself out. So if you're comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with that. I have absolute confidence in the 3 people that would be then on that special committee.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Any comments from other commissioners? Yes, Joan.
I guess I would draw my second from that, but for Bill's amendment. But so the 3 are O'Brien, Kandler, Truscott is the amendment, correct?
Yes, and you withdraw your second.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're back to the original motion. Kerry Chartkoff.
Could you restate the original motion?
Madam Secretary, do you have the original motion, or would you like Commissioner O'Brien to restate it?
I would appreciate it if Commissioner O'Brien would restate it.
Okay. Margaret, would you read your motion?
So the motion as it was amended just most recently, the motion is to form a committee to study the issue, seek input from the legislature and executive, and report back a recommendation to the full commission, and to name to the committee the chair, the vice chair, the secretary of Senate, and Bill Kandler. The amendment that was passed previously also added Commissioner Joan Bauer to the committee.
Which puts us back to 4.
So with the amendment that passed, it was 5, and the motion in front of us would reduce it to 3 to be appointed by the chair. So right now,
That she withdrew her second on that, so that's not yours.
so we don't have that motion. So right now, the existing motion has a committee of 5.
Committee of 5, including Commissioner Bauer.
And I would be happy to, just in the spirit of having conversation, I'm happy to second Mr. Kandler's motion to keep conversation going back. I haven't decided yet how I intend to vote, but I like the way the conversation's going.
Comments? Anybody have any idea what we're going to vote on here?
Not really.
I would like to have the secretary repeat the motion as it will appear in the minutes.
So, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, is Bill Kandler's motion still on the table?
No, because the second for that was withdrawn. So we're back to the amendment as it was.
The amended motion.
Yes.
So the current amended motion is moved to form a committee to study the issue, seek input from the legislature and executive, and report back a recommendation to the full commission, and to name to the committee the chair of the commission, vice chair, secretary of Senate, Bill Kandler, and Joan Bauer.
That is the motion as it is properly before the commission at this time. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Commissioner Truscott.
I would just say, and this is probably the deepest and most substantive conversation we've ever had on an issue around here. I think it signifies the weight that we all feel over this issue. It's a very serious issue. And to Joan's point on timing and Bill's point on timing, I think they would have all of our commitment that we're going to move this as quickly as possible, but we need to be respectful of other people's schedules as well. So for example, I want to make sure we have independent attorneys that are giving us advice that we can rely on, because again, we have potential liability here that we have to be very careful of. So we will move quickly, but as quickly as everybody's schedules will allow. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, the commission will proceed to vote. I would ask the secretary to call the roll.
Chair Randall,
Yes.
Vice Chair Truscott,
Yes.
Ms. Bauer,
Yes.
Ms. Chartkoff,
Yes,
Was that a yes, Kerry?
yes,
Yes, she votes yes.
Mr. Kandler,
Yeah.
Ms. O'Brien,
Yes.
The motion carries. That takes care of that agenda item. I say that, meaning that there's lots of work yet to be done. For those on the commission, feeling that this might be an attempt to stonewall or drag it out, I give you my word as the chair of the commission. We'll be meeting next week if we can arrange our schedules, and we will set out an aggressive schedule to deal with the issue. Yes, Bill, did you have a comment?
I think you just answered. I just wondered who was going to convene. You are. That's great. Perfect.
Okay, I'd like to call commission meeting back to order, and the chair recognizes Commissioner O'Brien.
Yes, sir. I move to adjourn the meeting citing public safety. We have some people who have infiltrated the meeting that are doing racial attacks and are threatening both legislators and individual commission members.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there support? Supported by Commissioner Truscott. All in favor of adjournment will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Hey.
The majority of members have moved to adjourn the meeting. The meeting stands adjourned.